Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins.
What's up, everybody? I am the Crypto Crow. I am still waiting on CLIF High to hop on, I figure I might as well just go live. It was scheduled for 12 o'clock, and you know, I'm sure he'll make it. I think he ran a little behind the last time we talked, so hopefully he'll just hop on, and then we'll just start talking to him. And in the meantime, I figured I'd hang out with you guys, kind of look at what's going on in the market a bit, and see what's happening in chat. Let's see what you guys got going on. Who do I see in here? I see Barbara Taylor. Let's see here. Greg Norman. Hope Cliff is putting the dogs outside. That might be what he's doing. I know it's like 9 o'clock in the morning for him. I sent him the link. I guess YouTube was having issues last night, and I saw you'd emailed me like 11 hours. Like, is this still going? And I got that email this morning, and I sent him, I'm like, yeah, everything is good. I checked everything. Everything looks fine. So, you know, hopefully all is well. Does he track Substratum and Amplify? I don't know, but we can ask him. David Fraser, please find out Cliff's thoughts on the recent increase in chatter around XRP, Swift, and policy. Okay. Duly noted. It's going to break all firewalls and decentralize access to the internet and all cryptos. What's up, everybody? Hey, Crow, I forgot to ask last time. Would you please ask him about blockchain terminals, since you were interested in that project? I am very, very interested in that project. And I think you're going to start seeing a lot of influencers with blockchain terminals coming up soon. DM Suja, tip $20 to ask a question. It's crazy sauce. You don't have to do all that. Ask Cliff about quantum blockchains once he gets on. Please and thank you. That's a good question. You know, one, well, I don't know if it'd be considered a quantum blockchain, but I know Cardano's working on some stuff with, you know, quantum level security and things like that. Quantum encryption, I think. I'm not 100% sure. Those are some of the things I wanted to talk about with Charles. LOL, $20 worth it. Hey man, if you're filthy rich, you throw $20 around like pocket change, more power to you. What's up, Crow? Is DJ Chaotic looking forward to Cincy Convention? Good deal, man. I'm glad. I'm extremely pumped about Chainwise, and we still have such a long ways to go. I actually had a company. I was really surprised by this. I had a company that it's actually one that I wanted to invest in, and I still kind of do. But they turned down an invite to have an exhibit at Chainwise, and I was like, man, like I made it so cheap for companies with all the exposure that they're gonna get. I'm like shocked, to be quite frank with you. Do you even lift? No, I'm small. I don't have pipes or anything. My arms are big. It's just because I'm an ogre. But I don't lift anymore right now. I'm gonna be starting though. I'm gonna be starting again very, very soon. I don't think Bitcoin is as bullish as some of my fellow traders think. The whales aren't done with us yet. You know what? I got an interesting call from a friend of mine last night, basically telling me that he wanted to know if I knew a place that he could get Bitcoin over the counter in mass. Apparently there's a group from a particular state known for money. And they're wanting a very, 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 let's put it this way. They want to buy so much Bitcoin, I don't think there's enough of it in the market volume. And what I'm seeing is there are a lot of people apparently going into buying. They want to buy Bitcoin, but they don't want to buy it on exchanges. Everybody is trying to buy over the counter right now. And I would be willing to bet. Well, I saw the one article that said over the counter Bitcoin volume is like 4 times that of exchanges. And so it's crazy because it's, to me, I almost feel like that shouldn't be allowed even, really. I don't even know if it is. But well, obviously it's allowed. It happens all over the place. Rich person to rich person. I mean, it's property, right? I mean, the government can't have it both ways. They can't say, well, this is property and but you can't trade it or sell it. I mean, I don't know. I guess they can, but overall, I know that the rich people are gearing up, and they're buying in, man. And I think they're trying to buy in. Like Mike Novogratz just basically said that he expects the Bitcoin price to really start rallying, the first and second quarters of 2019. And he basically said he doesn't see it getting higher than 10,000 by the end of 2018. And I think he's probably right, because a lot of people are kind of waiting for the SEC to approve the CBOE, the Van Dyke ETF, and I absolutely think they're going to. So, I don't know. We'll see. But I think that things are really going to start going crazy, I think, in the beginning of... I think it's almost going to be a reverse of what happened when, the prices shot up in January and then took a huge tank. If you look at the charts, the pricing for Bitcoin really started at it was prior to December. It was like November, December, January, boom, and it was at its all-time high, and then it started tanking. And I almost feel like we're going to have complete opposite effect, where things are going to start creeping into January, February. We're going to get the decision. Then I think it's probably going to take off. And then from that point, I don't know that it's ever going to come back down, to be quite frank with you. We're obviously going to have volatility. We're going to have some swings because the retail market's going to be crazy. But overall, we're going to have a lot more very, very wealthy people holding Bitcoin through custody solutions and things like that. And I don't think they're going to be selling it off, and we're not going to have a bunch of whale swing traders. We're going to have a bunch of whale long-term investors that are buying in and holding, for 3, 5, 10 years. And, some of these guys, keep in mind, some of these guys are so rich in other places, they're buying Bitcoin as something to put on their mantle. You know what I mean? They're not buying it to really trade it or do anything with it. They're buying it and they don't care. They don't need the money. So they can wait and buy 100 Bitcoin, 1,000 Bitcoin, whatever, and sit on it, stick it on their mantle to show people, and then, not touch it until it reaches $1 million. That's just going to be the kind of the nature of some of this. This bear market could push well into 2019. It's very true. It's 12/12. I'm really starting to get concerned on where CLIF is and what he's doing. Hopefully he's not emailing me, because I don't have email or any access to any of that stuff down here. Just because this is my streaming system, I do nothing with this. It's connected on a different... everything is different about this system. So I don't log into really anything. So, be great if you could, if for some odd reason he can't make it, he would let me know. But anyway, looks like there's a lot of people in here waiting on him. CLIF is tweeting now. Is he? What's he saying? I have a couple phones now. I have some dummy phones now. So just since AT&T likes to give away my phone number to people, he is waiting for me. I'm already in here. I'm in chat I'm in right here. I'm waiting on him. I sent him the Zoom link. There he is. There he is. I see him. He's coming up.
So do you need water and stuff? I got to do all that before I do the recording here.
Hey, CLIF, if you can hear me, we're live right now.
Yeah. So you want water? You want juice? You want?
All right. He's here, but he's still busy. He's doing some stuff. I think he's trying to get stuff situated, so I muted him because I don't think he realizes that we're live, and I don't want him to say anything that he doesn't want other people to hear. So he's coming. He's here. I'm gonna get rid of myself down here. Hide self view. There we go. So once he's ready, I'm sure he'll come on and we'll go from there. Let's make this full screen. You there, Cliff?
Yeah, and supervise everybody so they know what's going on. Yeah.
All right. I guess I'll know when he shows up. I need a key light. I didn't put my key light up yet. I need a key light behind my head. Flex for the camera, Crow. Yeah. I really don't have big arms. I mean, like, I don't know. The only muscle I have is just from carrying a bunch of fat around on a giant frame. This is pretty much all I've got. But there you go. He may spill some secret beans. Yeah, he might. You know, he could have government agents over there or something questioning him, and he doesn't want anybody to hear that. Either that or it's his wife, and he just wants to make sure his wife's taken care of before he sits down and chats for as long as we chat. Any workshops at Chainwise? That's interesting. I have not structured any yet, but I think it could be a good idea because I've actually had more than one person ask me if there were going to be any. I told CoinBase if he wanted to do something. Oh, wait, here we go. I think I see him.
All righty, hang on a second.
How you doing there, Cliff?
Doing fine. How's sound?
You sound fantastic, and
Okay.
we are live now, just so you know. So I
Okay,
went
cool.
ahead and
I
went
didn't
live
know-
at 12.
Didn't know if you're going live or not. I got to drink coffee here. It's early in the morning.
Oh, I completely understand.
Okay, Guy. Well, I'm set anytime you are.
Okay, we're here. So we've let me get rid of this panel here. Let's see here. Well, I want to. Okay, trying to figure out how to make this look the best. Let's make my giant body a little smaller down here.
You make me bigger. It shrink you by proportion.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and I know you can't see me, but everybody on YouTube can see me. But it's just, if you remember, it's kind of the way my thing works. It's a little wonky. Hold on, close. There we go. Okay. All right. So here we are. A lot of people, 350 people in chat. Now, somebody who really wants to know, before we get started in discussion, he said, ask Cliff about quantum blockchains once he gets on.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a tendency for people to throw everything at the blockchain. Okay. Kitchen sink blockchains, that kind of thing. Blockchains you have to understand what they are. They're a distributed ledger, which basically means they're a flat, non-SQL database, and they're really slow. Okay, because in order for a blockchain to work, you've got to have at least X number of computers that all agree that they're looking at exactly the same block, no ambiguity. So blockchains being used for other things like, passing video or even email doesn't make a lot of sense. And on the other side of that, a quantum machine doesn't work like a regular computer. So a quantum machine could not actually implement a blockchain. Can't be done because a quantum computer is an analog machine that like flashes. And so you can think of a quantum computer this way. You're in a room, it's absolutely dark, you've just been plopped in there, but you've got yourself a flash camera, okay? And the room has stuff in it. And the quantum effect occurs when you push that flash camera and you get a single flash to illuminate the room for that millisecond, and you've got to use your eyes to pick out what you can see and where they are, because you've got to use that single flash to navigate. That's what a quantum computer is. It basically just takes a flash of reality and distills it down to answer the question that you're trying to answer, because it's been sort of framed around that question. But they're not computational machines the way that digital computers are. So quantum blockchain ain't going to happen.
You don't think so?
No. Because see, a blockchain, it sits there. Okay, so I've actually got equipment here I'm going to set up as a mining operation. And what a miner does is it maintains the blockchain. It's one of those computers that sits there and agrees that it's looking at the same records with all the other computers. And so I know this stuff way deep, okay? And so here's something else about quantum machines and versus regular computers. In a regular computer, if I wanted to be that tedious, I could actually either print out the assembly language, print out the bytecode, print out the original programming language itself and do it by hand, but I could reduce that programming instruction, the complete program, down to a series of lines that are assembly code that I could look through each and every one of these. You do this as a programmer for optimizing, because frequently compilers are a little ambiguous and you can make the assembly language a little bit faster, that kind of thing, right? But the reason you would want to do it is for proof of execution. And that is to say, I can see each and every one of these lines. I know that the computer will do each and every one of these lines in sequence and so on. So I can be absolutely certain that I know what the computer is actually doing to arrive at the conclusion. Such things are not possible with quantum machines. You're not able to analyze any of the execution of the code. You basically you set up a state, and then you analyze the state once the quantum effect has been caused. And that's how they work. So people have kind of they shouldn't have named them computers, because they don't compute the way we think of as a digital machine computing. Gotcha. So sorry to get diverted there, but so a lot of people think, quantum computers are going to crack all the hash codes on blockchain. Well, it's really expensive. Yes, you could actually probably use a quantum computer to crack an individual hash on an individual coin. And it might take you 4 or 5 days to set up the code, a day to run the operation, a day to validate that the operation ran effectively, because bear in mind, quantum computers are doing good if they reach 78% accuracy and 78% effective conclusions because of the nature of this. Sometimes the flash doesn't work the way you want it. So about 20% of all of the times you fire off your flash, it's not going to happen. And same thing with the quantum computer. 20% of the time, the results are garbage. They're trash, and you just throw them out. So it could be used to crack an individual hash, but it's never going to be able to, crack the blockchain and get everybody's coins. It just doesn't work that way.
Gotcha. Yeah, there've been some comments coming in, and I've been adding your, half past human and just sizing everything, making sure everything works well while you were answering that. First of all, I want to say thank you for joining me again.
Sure.
It's actually, it's always exciting to listen to you, just because there's, I learn a lot of things I know nothing about, and I'm exposed to things I know nothing about, and it just drives me further to go out and research and learn. So, what's new with you? Before we get into some of this other stuff, how are you doing since we last talked?
Doing much better physically, recovering from my surgery and the problems I've had, and I've restructured some of my long-term goals. So not to bore you or anything, but I had a particular mindset that was induced in me by the condition that I had. And once I had the surgery and then the condition was cured, I got into recovery, and now the mindset has changed because I can see myself living out a number of years. And so I'm basically going back to school. So I'm diving deep into coding for handheld devices. That's step one. Then I'm going to get into AI in a real serious way, and then on to robotics over the course of the next year or so. And in the meantime, because of the stuff with some of the other code that I'm working on, I've gotten into dark web explorations, which is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I stay away from that, man. I don't know what's real and what isn't, but the dark web just sounds like you never know what you could find in there.
Yeah, it's they put a label on it like it was some kind of a thriller movie, but it's funny because you've got an HTML page, you've got a web page sitting right here on the server, and then right underneath it is a .onion page, both of which are text, both of which are stored as machine language, yet one is the dark web and the other isn't, right? Mm-hmm. It's simply because of the indexing. It's dark because nobody scans it. There's no crawlers to provide indexes for you and things. But it's where most of the internet lives. 97% of the internet's not indexed.
Really?
So Yeah, Google doesn't know anything at all about them. Oh, Google, speak of quantum computers, that's really what they're going to be used for, is to back up internet searches. So here's where we're at now on a functional level. There's, even though they're only indexing about 3% of all of the servers and all of the files on the servers, so only about 3% of the web, Google is running into performance issues in executing searches. All the search engines are. And that is because there's just so much crap out there, and us humans keep producing more crap to index and then also to search against. And so it was estimated that to do an effective, complete, and correct in the computer senses of those two words, I mean, at a formulistic level, search, and then validate that indeed the search had completed all the way through, Google estimated it would take their search engine 3 days to provide the output from that search, to do the search and then provide you with the output. And basically, here's what they're running into. You go to do a search on Google, you type in, Fred McMurray, and it says 6.5 million hits or something. Well, it's only showing you 20. Okay, it's not showing you 6.5 million of those records that it thinks relate to your search. It's just telling you that that's the estimate that it could drill down to if it wanted to. It's not in any way telling you about duplicates or about mispointers or any of this other sort of stuff. And even then, Google does everything it can to basically restrict your key clicks to the top 3. So it really only has to provide you with 3 hits for your search that may go towards your solving your question or meeting the conditions of your search. The more in-depth your search query, instead of saying or what birds produce blue eggs, if you just put in blue eggs, you're going to get an entirely different set of searches, right? If you put in what birds in North America produce blue eggs, then you get an even much tighter search. And Google likes these tighter searches because it uses that in their elimination process to drill down for you. But basically, they're trying to get you to only look at those top 3, and then they give you 20, but they're backfilling those other pages, reinstituting the search basically with a pointer into it as you go into drill down on it. They're trying not to search the crap beyond that first page because mostly 99% of the time you're not going to look at it, and it's really difficult, and it really cranks out on the servers in terms of the digital computations that are required. So what they're hoping to do is to have quantum computers fire off that flash, get that quantum state, pull out of that quantum state the exact 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 that you really wanted to see out of the entire 6.5 million without him, because right now those 6.5 million are arranged basically in a hierarchy that goes on an ID value. So they've got to be stepped through independently, one or in sequence, each one after the other. And that's what these digital computers are bogging down. They're grinding to a halt with all of this crap that we're producing that needs to be indexed and searched through, because fundamentally searching sequentially one after the other after the other after the other has very finite limits for both retrieval as well as mathematics. And that's what they're hoping to use quantum computers for. And so far it's sort of worked. I mean, they've got a 78% effective rate showing at the Google site with their quantum computer. And so there may indeed be some hope to it. Now, the problem at the moment is you can't just sit down at a quantum computer and start typing and hit enter and expect an answer back, because you have to do all this qubit setting up. And so it's a big process with a lot of rigmarole. And at that level, it's expensive. And so we're probably some distance in time and at least two key epiphanies about how this stuff works before we can actually stick a quantum computer on the other side of that server line and have them start feeding our searches to us.
Realistically, from my own personal guess is nobody uses page 2. Everybody says that if you ever want to hide a dead body, hide it on page 2 of Google. And right. The only time page 2 comes into effect is if you're searching for porn. Like you get tired of what's on page 1 and you might move down into page 2 and 3. Outside of that, nobody really even gets to page 2 because they find what they're looking for in the first 5 links typically anyway.
Yeah, the problem with that is the one I've found with Google If you cross compare Google to some of the other search engines, okay, like DuckDuckGo or even Northern Lights, or especially the Russian search engines, even on the same query, you find that Google is using an AI there that is using some kind of an aggregated associated words. So here's the thing. If I do a search on Google for a specific thing, frequently I do go down to page 5, 6, 7, 10, whatever, because I'm actually looking at the patterns that the search results itself reveals, not just the information, right? And I frequently find that Google is not censoring or anything. They're steering you based on other language in your query, what they happen to know about you, because they're looking you up on their records as you're doing these searches. And so that AI is actually bubbling you. Okay, it has a tendency to present those records it thinks that the software thinks you want to see, as opposed to all of the records that are available to be seen.
Sure.
And so it's kind of like
which is based off a lot of like social signals and a lot of
correct.
outside activity, basically
Correct.
telling the algorithm that this is valuable, this is worth being seen by other people.
Correct, but that's not necessarily always true.
Right.
And then this is where anybody with a political bent can come on in and simply place some check marks in the database that controls the actions of what the AI seeks about you, and then Bob's your uncle. Whole political realms are screened out. And actually, see, part of the thing I was looking at on the dark web was. Everybody says, oh, well, it's for porn and drugs. And
or
well,
hitman.
yeah, or hitman, but for criminal activity, right?
Right.
I would agree that 99% of the activity on the dark web is indeed criminal in one way or another. But only let's say, just hazard a guess, 15% or less is involved with either with any crimes against a person at a deliberate level. All the others are crimes against institutions and law. So a lot of the people that are on the dark web are there because the countries they operate in would have them shot if they trace their activities to Google or any other of these activities, right? A lot of the people on the dark web are true whistleblowers, and they're putting out stuff that they know in a way that protects their identity so they don't get killed by any of the giant aerospace corporations when they reveal they are actually working on a back-engineered space alien spaceship, that kind of thing. So the dark web serves a huge, great purpose, and I would have to say, like my guess is about 85% of it is not related to drug, sex, or murder, right? It's all the other 85% is related. There's a bunch of junk. There's a bunch of weird ass stuff out there, but that 85% is in the main. It appears to be people promulgating a whistleblower story or releasing information for whatever reason and at whatever level of accuracy. I'm not verifying that that these guys are accurate or they're anything more than LARPers, but it does lend credence when you're putting a story out on the Onion Tor network as opposed to putting it out on the web. Right. Because you truly have to go to some lengths to try and hide your identity to do it effectively on the dark web.
Wow. Yeah, I'm fascinated by the dark web, but I'm scared to death of it at the same time. It's just like one of those places. It's like I don't know. What the bar on Tatooine with all of the bounty hunters and the crazy people in Star Wars. It's like I know they're there and they can all hang out and enjoy themselves. I don't necessarily need to participate. I'll just keep my narrow ass outside safe. Even though I'm probably myself and other influencers are probably topic for discussion on a lot of those places, and I actually had that.
Oh yeah, that's something else. I should tell you there that if you want to find out who's letting out a contract on you, this is the way to go, right? Get yourself a Tor browser and start learning how to do it.
Right. Yeah, and I get alerts like when I come up, I get alerts on what information of mine is on the dark web. I don't know how good it is, but like LifeLock. I get.
I wouldn't trust any of that crap, dude.
Yeah.
The dark web is not a stable business environment. Okay, so you might, for instance, one of the major search engines for the dark web is kaput. They're just not operating it anymore for whatever reason.
Oh, really?
And Oh yeah. And this stuff happens all the time. And it was like the 6th major search engine that particular year. And this is Torch that I'm talking about. But there's Dark Web Wiki and some of these others. But I wouldn't trust the commercial operations that go into the dark web to ostentatiously say, oh, we're going to provide you with the information, look up and see if someone's got a hit out on you or this kind of thing.
Well, yeah, it's more like we found your email address on the dark web kind of stuff.
Oh, I got you. That sort of stuff.
Yeah, very basic. It's not like, someone's selling drugs on dark web using Tor under your name. Like, it's nothing like that. Right. It's just, because I know that with all the hacks, like the Equifax and the Facebook and all of these data mining hacks, that information's basically being sold in bulk on the dark web. And so it's basically letting you know, hey, you've got some personal information that's out there. You might want to change it. Is kind of what it's saying.
Okay, and if that's the case, if you're talking about the bulk sales of the data and stuff, and see that kind of stuff I classify with the sex, drugs, and murder side of the dark web. By the time they find your name, it's already been sold.
Right.
Okay, because the bulk zipped files are further encrypted and they're not exposed until the deal is done, and then they're transferred. So they're not actually ever resident anywhere that they could be picked up and searched on by anybody's search.
Right.
Plus, what's really funny here, what's really goofy, is that the corporate people, some of the LifeLock and some of these other companies, are leaving. I mean, these guys are like a bunch of New Yorkers out here in our woods, okay? People that are used to streets all of a sudden finding themselves in the deep, dark woods, and they just don't know how to navigate because they're leaving trails all over to hell and gone. They're picked up even by, casual observers like myself. So the thing about the dark web is you're vulnerable going onto it. If you know what you're doing while you're on there, you're using a VPN, you got your camera, occluded, all of that kind of stuff, you're safe. But when you exit, you're also vulnerable. And so it's at those 2 points you really need to guard your security on this. And the corporation guys, it's like, I don't know where they train them, but they're not doing anything to guard themselves as they exit back to regular web stuff. So if you ever get on the dark web, don't casually use the Tor browser to go on over and do a Google search on regular HTML pages, because you've got to go out of the Tor to get to the regular HTML to do that, and it's at that server that you leave trails.
It's like going through a wormhole in EVE Online. You got to there's a whole
gotta
process.
Clean up your act. Right. It's a whole process, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Okay, Supo Man came on. Supo Man, are you familiar with Supo Man?
Sorry, no.
No? He's actually, in my opinion, he's probably one of the biggest crypto YouTubers on YouTube. Every time the son of a bitch goes live, he sucks up all the traffic from the rest of us. And but anyway, he came on. He asked me last week, how did you get CLIF to do an interview? And I'm like, I just emailed him. He was super cool, and I think he's interested in talking to you. But he did have a question. He said, ask CLIF what he thinks of blockchains like Credits and Sparkster that are achieving 1.5 to 10 million TPS, and if that's just bullshit.
It need not be bullshit. Okay, here's the concept. They could indeed be engineering it. The bullshit would come in that they're claiming it's 100% on the blockchain, because it's kind of like the idea of the Lightning Network. Because whenever anybody says to you, "Well, we're going to implement a Lightning Network or whatever," be aware that's centralized off-chain verification and math, and then they insert it back into the blockchain to get the consensus and everything. So there's a chunk of your stuff that's going on off the blockchain. So yeah, Bitcoin is slow, and there's a ton of ways to really speed it up that don't involve Lightning Network. But there are people that are going to be doing Lightning Network kind of things there. So if you built that process into your mining operation, you could do this very effectively, where there would be off-chain reconciliation and take off some of the performance of the actual computation. Bear in mind, most of the blockchain. Okay, all right. So let's divert for a second. Let me stop. I don't believe they're doing it 100% on that level of transactions per second on a regular mined blockchain. unless they're using nodes that are attached to some supercomputers that are like owned, and then you're basically talking about a centralized chain. Okay, so it seems very hard to imagine that they're getting that kind of throughput just because of the consensus algorithm. I'd actually have to look at the code and see if they've come up with something new. If they have, they should really patent the ability to do that. Absent a patent to that, I would suggest that they're doing some form of what we can think of as a lightning network style, which is a side chain or a sister chain or child chain or sibling chain that does the reconciliation and then feeds back in. Okay, so now here's the thing about blockchain. We are spending most of our electricity for Bitcoin, and we'll just use Bitcoin as an example, but it's appropriate for almost all the coins. We're spending 90%, at least, maybe as high as 99% of all the electricity for the blockchain in doing the hash. Okay, and that's where it just sits there and crunches and crunches and crunches to get the hash to meet the SHA-256 criteria algorithm. And that's where most of the consumption and processing power is. And yet it seems useless. No one's ever tried to crack the hash. It's not really doable to go to an individual record in blockchain info on Bitcoin, pull up that record, that block, and attempt to crack the hash, because you're not ever really going to get a Bitcoin there. You would need to have a complete block on either side of it, and maybe even two, in order to have a hope of stealing any of the Bitcoin that's encoded within that hash. So we're trying to protect something that can be protected with a much smaller degree of hashing algorithm that wouldn't consume so much power or time. So Bitcoin could be speeded up, in my way of thinking, and I was just back of the envelope kind of calculations, by a factor of 10 by reducing the hashing value in half. And the hash 256, or the SHA-256 hash, if reduced in half, it's my personal belief that we would suffer zero increased vulnerability as a result of only that.
Huh. So
yeah, they may be really fast, but I don't think it's I don't think it's all on the chain.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some, there are a lot of projects that are now claiming, 1 million transactions per second, 300,000, 500,000, and so forth. And, I think everybody's, I mean, a few months ago, it made sense for companies to be using that as kind of their big claim to fame. But I think anymore, it's being claimed by a lot of different companies. And just I think it might have even have been you that said, a while back, look, 1 million transactions per second doesn't mean squat if it's just ones and zeros that mean or do nothing. I mean, it's data transfer. It's, what do these transactions actually mean to the blockchain or the use case? That's what's really important, So
let's stop right there too, and let's also acknowledge that this drive towards transactions per second is being forced on the blockchain community, or not forced on. It was a kind of a trick from Visa and MasterCard. Mm-hmm. They let out that we're processing 44 million transactions, et cetera, et cetera. And so the transactions per second meme, that whole thought process is trying to compete with them. But we've got to acknowledge, in the point of sale system, the POS, the point of sale system, the bog down is not the back end processing. Okay, it's the network and all the other stuff in between. So the actual movement of the transactions in the centralized machine that is Visa or MasterCard, it happens like that, and they can still be bogged down by what's going on the network in between. Same thing is true with the blockchain itself, except we have the other slight slowdown, which is that on our back-end processing are a whole bunch of PCs or computers that are all in their own little network, basically functioning as a single point of contact for that point of sale. So again, even if we were able to increase the transactions per second on a blockchain to reach those that are claimed by MasterCard and Visa, we're still going to have network issues. You're still going to have to wait there for that damn machine to accept the swipe on the card and process it and drop it onto the line, get the connection, get the acknowledgement, send the information, wait for the return, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. I'm getting, man, a lot of people are telling me how great you look, by the way. So
thanks. I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah.
You do look good. What? Please ask Cliff his opinion on the blockchain terminals.
Again, a temporary idea in space that's more of a marketing kind of an issue, and it'll be soon superseded by changes in the technology as we go forward.
You think so?
There,
like I actually,
do.
I saw, I've seen the blockchain terminals at work and basically what they're going to offer traders. And I was personally pretty blown away, and a lot of the stuff isn't really public yet. Is the problem? So
okay, so yeah, all right. Well, without discussing that,
Yeah.
my thing is just a generalized paradigm,
Right.
in the sense that not that the terminals can't do it as well, but there's been a bunch of breakthroughs in support AI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So human decision making support AI is different from the general smart AI that they're trying to get out there, which we know now craps out against human traders.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but they ran a study of the past year, and those high frequency traders that were using AI were 7%. We're at a 5% to 7% return, whereas human traders were 13 to 18%.
Really?
Really, right? Because the AI, and here's the thing: AI is really smart, but it's got tunnel vision, and so if you tell it to look for a pattern, it will do its best to find that pattern, even if it's in noise
Right.
and not signal, right? And since so much of market activity is noise, and Aunt Martha freaking out because of something outside the markets entirely, but telling her broker to sell, that kind of thing intrudes, and so AI is making a lot of bad decisions when left on its own relative to trading. So we won't see at this stage, unless there's some huge breakthrough there, we won't see a self-contained AI that is trading against human traders effectively. Now, what some people are doing, though, is they're engineering AI to provide a decision support matrix to your decisions in real time as you're making them. And in the software I've been allowed to have a look at is phone based.
What?
So be able to just dial it up on your smartphone and go.
What do you think about these blockchain phones, like the Siren Labs blockchain and I guess Pundi X?
So
Gimmick?
Well, exactly. It's a marketing thing, right? I've worked in the telephony industry, and in fact, that was my second major. That's right. Second major computing job was with an OSP, an other service provider. And so I've been with telephony at the backbone level since this would have been 81 maybe. And so I've seen a lot of it at that level. And any of these kind of things, again, trying to apply the blockchain to it, who benefits? Blockchains are about consensus and about we're agreeing that this record is exactly this record and is not being double spent anywhere else. That's the whole point of the blockchain, is the consensus algorithm and the distributed ledger. So the blockchain equals sophisticated computer accounting and nothing more. Blockchain does not equal a way to pass videos back and forth. It doesn't offer benefit to anybody for any of that kind of stuff. But if you're in the money business and you're in the trust business and you're in the accounting business, you're going to be living in blockchain for the next 100 years. Make sense?
Yeah.
I can get down to the code if you want, but...
Oh, I'm sure you could. And I wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about. But yeah, I'm actually curious to see where some of this blockchain phone technology does take us. I mean, right now I do feel it's a little gimmicky, but I think it really just kind of plays into what sort of use case in software applications and how it's connected. There's actually two projects actually that I'm personally very interested on your perspective on. Two of them I've done recent videos on, and they're two of some of my favorite projects: Aeon and Matrix AI. And I'm hoping to God you don't tell me they're both bullshit. But
not familiar. I don't think I'm familiar with them. I think I've heard of the Aeon, but the Matrix AI is a new one.
Okay, so I guess the most important that I would think for long term is Aeon, and basically Aeon is it's a protocol that enables different blockchains to kind of share data and work together. Okay,
Convergence. Sure,
yes.
they're in the they're in the convergence sweep arena. Sure, that's going to be a valid growth potential industry for, say, at least 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll solve all the technical problems, and it'll just be maintenance, and we don't forget about it.
Okay, fair enough.
But it'll be a producer. I mean, it'll be like owning a chunk of, a back end phone company or something like that. The convergence companies that provide the cross. See, here's the thing. Okay, so that kind of company provides a platform on which we can do atomic level swaps, and there is a huge demand for atomic level swaps. That's a huge disintermediation of all different kinds of financial banking kind of stuff. It's the next big area we're going to get into. So your company there is going to be one of the platforms that provide that layer that allow others to actually tweak their blockchains to implement the cross atomic swaps. Make sense?
Yeah, and the way I see Aeon is something that could potentially end up working on. When I talk about mass adoption and mass use cases and things like that, to me, it's when the blockchain space has made everything so easy for like my mother to use blockchain services that she doesn't need to understand what the hell it is. And I think that we're going to have different projects, different protocols and blockchains that offer specific services and functionality that means something to everybody. But it's not going to be until all these different blockchains are able to truly communicate with each other and work as a single unit, right? In some sense. To me, that's where I see
agree.
Aeon kind of playing a role.
But
that
also bear in mind,
interoperability kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's a process. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at a multi-year process. And as I say, once they've solved a lot of the technical problems, then that will be just a generalized producer, but it won't be such an exciting kind of a company anymore.
Yeah.
But I certainly do agree with you. That is the limiting factor at the moment is the inability of the blockchains to effectively integrate swaps blockchain to blockchain and still maintain consensus.
Right. Absolutely. Cool. I'm glad that you like that. I'm glad you agree. Could you ask
what was
CLIF,
the other one? Sorry,
Matrix
what was the other
AI. Matrix AI is a little bit more. We'll come back to Matrix AI.
Okay.
It's they're going to be doing a lot of different stuff. I mean, some of the projects that I like are the ones that are. I'm thinking more forward. I'm not so much interested in projects that sound super cool today, and they fizzle out tomorrow because once the hype dies down. I like some kind of longer term projects that are, really planning out how to kind of take things to the next level beyond where we are currently. And a lot of the Coins I Love videos that I do are about those projects.
Okay, let me just add a little word of caution here, okay? A way of framing your thinking about such things that might make you a better trader in the long term. This is entirely from a technical perspective. If you had a company that had a bunch of people that was doing very large planning on projects, and they were planning out 10 years, and they had a really solid technological plan for that 10 years, and they were slotting themselves into it and had everything, all their ducks lined up, and all the ducks are quacking appropriately and so on in the plan, we still need to be aware that there are very, very, very creative people out there with the tools now that are incredibly cheap to allow them to have that epiphany that creates that insight that allows them to develop a tool that totally screws that company's plan because they've been disintermediated because the technology took a leap and went the other way. So in my opinion only, we cannot approach anything related to blockchain the way that we approached the telephony industries in the 70s.
Right.
Okay, with the breakup and everything, there was the same kind of feeling with all of the new baby bells and all of this kind of stuff in that period of time. And it was appropriate to bet on a baby bell, MCI or one of these others going out 20 years with a technology plan. Now, any technology that you can think of that you might take 10 years to develop, there might be someone else that comes along and leapfrogs you with an insight that you didn't see in that technology chain, and it gets you to that 10-year goal next year. Mm-hmm. So you just need to put real hard filters and not trust or examine the people up and down and get really solid with them, and then trust their opinion if they're telling you that they've got a solid long-term plan for growth in the blockchain industry. Look how much things have changed in just 8 years.
Just 1 year, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess I will, because you are probably the perfect person. So so Matrix AI is basically it's a platform that's going to enable people to write their own smart contracts using natural code, like natural,
Sure.
yeah,
Natural language.
natural language, exactly. So the AI platform is what kind of interprets the natural language and puts it into smart contract code, so that it's, anybody can create different things. And to me, that's what, giving people the opportunity or the ability to create different applications for whatever they want, whether it's for their own company. It's like, how many companies out there want to have their own kind of white labeled app on the app store to do whatever, whether it's a mortgage calculator or a lead campaign generator, whatever. Not that a lot of that stuff obviously needs to be in smart contract, or can be, but the point is that the more freedom people have to engage a particular protocol or blockchain and create, period, I feel like that's something that could help really take off. And all, I mean, Matrix AI's main partner is China, and their whole thing is the Belt and Road. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So, dude, I'm deep into it.
Matrix AI is
the.
There you go. So Matrix AI is the primary blockchain for the Belt and Road. All the different blockchain projects apparently are going to be working with Matrix AI, and they're using their platform to create the smart contracts for all of the other little applications that are supposed to be filling out that whole project.
Cool. Yeah. No, I think smart contracts are just sparkly little gems out there in the computing and financial world, and that we haven't even explored what they're capable of.
Right.
And just the other day, I was thinking about smart contracts and came up with this idea for time value tokens. Okay, where you're actually extracting the time component from a commodity as it goes forward in time, and you're able to trade that commodity. And I'll give you an example real quick. You got a small winery; they produce just kick-ass wine. It gets awards all the time. As the wine ages, it sells more and more dollars per bottle each and every year. Well, this winery, knowing they're going to continue to produce award-winning wines, they start, like the European wineries, they start setting aside a certain amount of their wine in a reserve that they then put on their books to be sold, 15 years, 20 years down the road. This will allow us to extract the time component from that 15-year period, trade it, and so on. And the smart contract aspect of it comes in with some thinking I had on there about, what happens, as in the case of World War II, if a bomb comes down and destroys most of a particular primo vintage. Well, my approach to a smart contract would take all of everybody's coins and divert all the value to the remaining bottles, because that's actually what happens in reality. So there was a vintage I was aware of that was set down in before World War I. It was set down in like 1908 or something, stored, and then in World War II, giant bomb comes in and blows up everything except for like 2 cases of this wine. And then just a few years back, those 2 cases sold for far more than the entire crop of that wine at the time of that entire crop harvest. And so these kind of contracts, this extraction of these kind of time from these kind of components forms a new kind of an element within smart contracts. So, and it'd be really cool. The smart contract this one would be a real interesting one, because unlike regular financial instruments, like you buy a share of stock, you have a contract in perpetuity. If you decide to gift that stock in the form of inheritance to children, then they still own that chunk of the company. In my case here with the smart contract, when that reserve was sold, then you could disassociate the smart contract. Everybody could be paid off, so it would be sort of like an annuity with a defined payout.
Right. I actually had a bourbon company contact me who had a plan to do something like that for whiskey barrels.
Send them to Reggie Middleton at Veritasium. He and I have had some discussions about this. The very platform Veritasium is ideally suited for these kinds of smart contracts against a commodity. And Reggie has had the skill and the success so far in getting precious metals set up that way. So
that's brilliant, actually. Could you ask CLIF if DAG infrastructures like Nano and Hashcraft will supersede blockchain?
I doubt it. Seriously, the Hashcraft thing is it's a really good idea, but it doesn't really provide enough benefit to cost ratio to implement in a blockchain. It'll give you a slight level of increase in confidence on the consensus algorithm, but insofar as I've been able to look at all the performance bottlenecks and stuff, it's not going to make anything that significantly faster, nor that much more secure, and it's going to be a pain in the butt to monitor. It can break easily. So I'm not a real fond of Hashcraft. But
you think it's maybe a little before its time still?
No, I think that okay, so let me see if I can put it to you this way. Within the structure of the consensus algorithm that we're running on the blockchains now, we can think of that as being a structured or orderly consensus, where very much like the way in which computers operate line by line by line in code, right, the consensus is achieved by each computer talking to each other in order to achieve a common understanding of what the block is they're looking at. Hashgraph, on the other hand, doesn't take this defined approach. What they do is they have a much more amorphous approach of getting the
organized chaos.
Organized chaos, if you will. Right, exactly. And the problem is that I've been in situations where organized chaos was attempted to be implemented in corporate environments, and we were not able to press the knowledge down into the people. We could get the system to work, there was no question, but to try and get people educated enough to train to work on it basically made the whole thing non-operational. So I had here's an example. I had a particular project where they had every giant company had everything they owned, all their desks, computers, pencils, everything owned into a database. We're talking a company with at that time over 119,000 employees in the U.S. alone. And they wouldn't be able to run and do accounting on all the shit they owned to support all of these employees. And they could query, this is back in the early days of SQL, back in the 90s, and they could query their SQL database, and the SQL statement was basically very simple. It said, join these two tables and give me the end result. And they would send that query off, and they hired me later and paid me an exorbitant amount of money to fix it for them, because as soon as they pushed the enter button, they could go and take a 3-week fishing holiday and come back, and 3 weeks and 1 day, the printer would fire off and it would start printing out the results. It took the SQL engines that long to organize all this data into a conjoined table to be able to start kicking out any kind of results. And so I was hired to make this, the computer program worked. It was accurate. They could check the results. Everything was fine. It just didn't work in human time because there was so much data. This was one of the first times I'd ever run into this same issue that basically Google is running into that we discussed earlier. And so my approach there was they had in that SQL design, which was standard, object-oriented, the whole thing. It was perfect. It had been done by some people under contract to Microsoft Consulting and some other people, and they hit this thing hard. They developed really good code. They optimized it, but the paradigm was bad for what they were attempting to do. The data overwhelmed them. And so under the circumstances, what I did was to take the complexity, because they had 400 static tables in the SQL database, which is no big deal. And then they had another up to 1,200 temporary tables that were being created as they ran these queries. And that was the 1,200 tables in TempDB that was causing all the problems in the server and the bog down. So what I did was to eliminate all of that and took it down to 7 tables. And I didn't store, I made up a sandbox. I sandboxed the whole thing. We do all the data over and everything, but I didn't store everything in terms of a tick mark for each 386 PC and each 486 PC and each PC running on Pentium. I didn't do it that way. I stored the words about Intel 386 blah blah blah, the description of it. I stored those words once, and then I just had a whole series of integer IDs that pointed to the actual records for any of those individual machines that met that criteria. The problem was 7 tables had to be joined in a union. That was no big deal. SQL Server could do that, but it made a SQL statement that ran 3, 4, 5,000 words. And humans were not capable of following the logic to extract the data out of that. But I met my contract because I could push my enter button on my 3,000 word SQL query. It was actually slightly less than that. And against my 7 tables, I created 4 temp tables, and the thing would start spitting back in about 3, 4, 5 seconds. So it would still take 2 weeks to print it all out, simply because of the bogged down on the printer and all of this, but it actually was operational. And they used it for some time. The problem was they had to keep coming back to me anytime they wanted to change any of the logic within the query statement, because we couldn't train we couldn't get the guys to wrap their head around what was going on there. So it was the paradigm that was causing the problem.
Sounds like a consultant's dream.
It was, but see, here's the thing. I'm not your usual consultant. I thrive on creativity. I get bored very easily, and I quit as soon as I get bored. So I'm not a very good employee.
I hear you. I'm the same way.
Okay, and in that sense, see, that's what we're running into at this stage. It's a complexity paradigm issue that we're encountering. We're going to run into this issue over the next 3 or 4 years at the computing level within the blockchain industry. There will be technological improvements, and hopefully there will be a couple of technological epiphanies that will give us insights. And if any of these two that I'm thinking may occur actually happen, it's going to totally disrupt the blockchain industry relative to future plans. And it will accelerate some things back to us by 5, 6, 7 years. And that's huge in this business.
So I've got a couple more questions, and then there's some stuff that I really want to dive into about the financial markets going on. Please ask CLIF about his opinion on the versus hash algorithm that Verus Coin implemented last week in Komodo is now about to be implemented.
The Komodo guys are really good. Okay, they've got some smarts there. The Komodo development team, and as I was saying earlier, the SHA-256 is bogging us down for no net gain. So I'm in favor of this approach, and I don't want to cause any kind of like market changes or anything, because we're not yet mature in this. All right, there's still ways we can screw up, but the fact that we've got people that are looking at alternative implementation that have actually keyed in and seen where this giant bottleneck is and this giant electricity consumption is for no real net gain. And so the solution, I think, is to replace SHA-256 and go to something far more practical. So I'm in favor of that approach in a specific way.
So okay, how do you go to? Do you take melatonin? I'm curious. When you go to sleep at night.
No, I take 2 magnesium and a sunflower lecithin.
I couldn't imagine having your brain and actually being able to fall asleep with that thing just churning away at night. I struggle enough.
That's why a meditation guy. I mean, truly, I can shut off my interior voice and then I'm out 19 minutes later, no question.
I'm going to have to try that. I might start with hot yoga. And I know a bunch of fighters that do the hot yoga thing, so it's not such a feminine thing anymore. But, yeah, I need something, because I get to sleep at 3, 4 in the morning. I can't turn it off, and I don't have half the mind you do.
Here's what you got to do. You got to get chelated magnesium, okay? We don't eat enough greens. We don't consume enough. That's the primary source of magnesium. It's at the center of the chlorophyll molecule. But your magnesium is good for the heart. It makes the veins supple and all of this kind of stuff. And it aids you in the neurotransmitters that aid you to go to sleep. It can be somewhat disruptive on your stomach. You need to take these things about an hour before you want to go to sleep. But it turns out now, after the study of the heat shock therapy, you were talking about the hot yoga, they're saying if you'll take the magnesium and then go and have a hot shower and then come out of the hot shower and wait 15 or at least 15 minutes to go into the cool down, then you'll find that you'll be able to go to sleep. Because what happens is when you go to sleep naturally and you're lying there and your body gets you to sleep, you'll actually go through a period of time where your temperature raises up and then it slowly goes down to the sleeping temperature. This effect is mimicked in the proteins of your system by the hot shower before you go to bed.
Interesting. Yeah, I take a bath at night. Not that you needed to know that, but I take a bath at night before I go to bed.
Yeah, too much information.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, most people shower first thing when they wake up in the morning, and it's like my bath time is my time to just chill out, tell the world to peace out, and and I start my whole wind down process. Okay, right. So obviously there's been a lot of weirdness going on in the markets, with this whole 2018. The stock crash, basically, there's obviously a big stock crash kind of happening on that day and progressing. And, the Bitcoin price and the huge pumps and the big dumps and everything else going on. what are your thoughts on? Well, first of all, what are your thoughts like short term and throughout the rest of this last quarter of 2018 in terms of the Bitcoin price? And then I'd love to dive into this whole kind of conspiracy, whether like I did a video recently on about the cover of The Economist, and a lot of people were saying that's not even the real cover, that it was like, a fake cover. Just get all your thoughts on all of this good juicy stuff.
Okay, so insofar as the financial system at the moment, all right. Okay, so we've got a situation that had shown up in my data way back last year, and it projected basically a very large bull run through 2018, which did not happen. And instead, what happened? Instead of reaching the 20,000+ mark in March, April, or May, as was suggested by my data, we ran that forward. It was pulled forward. We didn't run it forward. It was manipulated and pulled forward into December. The people that were pulling that forward did so with, I now am fairly confident I know this to be true, did so with a plan. And the idea was to delay as much as they could a naturally unfolding series of events that would have placed us in March, April, or May at $20,000 Bitcoin with this huge run up ahead of us in this giant bull run. They could not have that, though. And we're talking banksters, politicos, deep state government guys, because they're not ready for it. Now, they still think they're not ready for it. They will be thinking that they're not ready for it when the transition breaks loose and occurs without their control. So we have to understand that basically what they're doing is they're going to be fighting a delaying retreat kind of an action and have been since January. They were trying to, now Bitcoin has particular patterns. If you go back prior to this year and look at the patterns, you see that we have this little dip that usually occurred in January, February, and then we would run up the rest of the year and then dip again, etc. This was its developing pattern over time. The guys who did the manipulation pumped like mad, brought in a bunch of big money in order to bring it way up such that we had a much higher or a much larger delta between the expected downturn and the level they were able to pump it up. That being said, the other part of that component is they still don't think they're ready. And yet they know we need a transition. They know the Fed is dying, that its ability to control either monetary policy or fiscal policy is eroding with the purchasing power of the dollar, which is now, by some estimation, less than 1 penny. Against its 1913 value. So the inflation calculators you see online are bogus. They're not really showing you how bad the inflation has been. Anyway, though, so the expectation is as follows. All right, so that having been said, I've been waiting all year for their manipulation ability to break. Their manipulation ability has been based on two separate tracks, one of which was this core of Bitcoins that were held in the Mt. Gox trustee situation, right? And they provided a lot of political pressure on that court system in Japan and on the trustee there in order to get those things sold off in 3 large tranches, which is what helped crash the price. Their other approach to controlling these things has been, in my opinion, manipulations via Tether and Ethereum and sucking things off there. We notice now that they don't have the Bitcoins to sell anymore, they've had to really pump up a lot of the activity over June, July, August relative to Tether and those coins that they do control, especially Ripple. And their effects within Ripple was on a 6-week cycle, by the way. They were harvesting every 6 weeks out of there, and that appears to have shrunk now. But the approach that they took is such that we're now seeing the Tether peg, the Tether hook that allowed their control, start eroding away as all these other more stable coins come on in. And we're going to get the big Tether blow up, as it turns out that, in my opinion, it was bogus. They never had a 1-to-1 match or any of this kind of thing. Now, so going forward here, what I'm actually waiting for is to reach a day where the ability to manipulate crashes is gone because they don't have any more fuel to manipulate with. And we will get to that point where those emotional tones that I picked up within my data sets will then pick back up again. Now, my question is to myself about what's going to unfold. Have all of those emotional tones been compressed by or they have been compressed, not eliminated, compressed by this manipulation that's going on? And so will those emotional tones rocket right on up in the same time period, or will they spread out in the original time period projected? I can't answer that, but I know that we will reach that emotional tonality. I know this because of the emotions around 6,400 Bitcoin. And so I need to explain that. There's an emotional tone value that when people express words, they're actually putting emotions into the words. And that emotional tone value can be summed up. And around 6,400 was like the line in the sand. That was where the strong hands said, I ain't selling. You can drive it down to zero. I ain't selling. And prior to that, we had all of the weak hands, institutional, everybody else that was flopping around and selling off against the continued downward pressure. But we hit 6,400, and it was like, that's when the strong hands came on out. And that was it has the same emotional tonality that we used to see back in the 90s or 80s with the bond vigilantes, where they said, this far, no further. And they were willing to take the emotional and monetary hit to enforce that emotional idea in their head. And so at 6,400, we hit that. So I knew that the emotions were going to be good, because the 6,400 line was what had been predicted by my data as being our emotional floor, that we just wouldn't go below. And, it's like, I'm not going to sell my few Bitcoins at $6,400 or less. I'll let them go to zero. Screw it. To hell with it.
I feel like the people, when the price does dip below that, because I've felt pretty much the same thing, that 6,400 is about the floor right now. And that when the price does dip below that, I've always, because when it happens, it always happens within like an hour to 4 hour time frame. And it happens pretty much all at once. And it almost strikes me as either a very small group of major holders, or one person who's having his fun to try and drive the price down, to try and reaccumulate as much as he can quickly at a lower price point, just because there isn't much more activity going on other than that. The public, generally, the people that are holding, are not selling at these prices. It's a very small group of people that are pushing that down temporarily.
Right, exactly. But there's a whole lot of verbiage about it in the financial press and stuff. But I agree with you. It is a small group. There's some, you could, for instance, anybody that was computer savvy could download software online that provides you with the ability to run the software, and it forms networking based off data you provide it, tells you who knows who and what, and so you could infer that they were doing things together. But our small group here, let's just assume that it's mainly bankers and politicos and so on. And they don't feel that we're ready to transition to this new world. But they know that the dollar is dying, and they're seeing the effects of it all around the planet. Venezuela, Turkey, you name it, any country that's in political or financial distress, you can probably drill down and find that they're pegged to or tied to the dollar somewhere. And at that point, the people that are in charge, the powers that be, are going to have to make a decision here. They've made the decision a few years back to get into this technology, but they didn't want the public to get into it until it was ready to roll out. Mm-hmm. As you say, your grandmother just wants her Visa card, right? She doesn't want to know how to deal with the blockchain on the other side of it. And they're waiting for that the powers that be are waiting for that infrastructure to be built out, which we're building it out now. Mm-hmm. And more people are coming on, and we're trying to, the industry is trying to hire blockchain programmers like mad, smart contract programmers, et cetera. But the powers that be don't feel that it's fast enough. But I think sometime this year, they won't be able, well, actually, I think they've lost their ability to control. I'm seeing the signs now in the stuff coming out about Tether, the EOS, and all of this, and some other technical issues within the blockchain community that is telling me that the powers that be, that it's actually slipping out through their fingers as it's happening right now. So I was able back in September to say that I expected it would be the 15th of October. So it hit 5 days early, okay? Based on just looking at the data, looking at where we were with the emotional sums, I was saying, oh, okay, look, this is going to coincide with this. around the 15th of October, and we'll start in on the bull run again. It'll be a little choppy, and then we're going to have a Bitcoin weekend that'll give us 9% up over the course from Friday through to Monday. We're going to go through a week, and then within that 3-week block, we'll go into all green for some period of time near the end of that 3 weeks, and then we're off into the bull run. And the question that, as I said earlier, I have is, will we reach the heights of the bull run within a compressed period of time, or will the time be the determining factor, not the amounts? And I don't know. So I'm waiting for a universe to fulfill it, and then I'll match it back against data, and I'll be able to say, aha, it went this way or it went that way.
I have a theory, and I would love to hear your take on it, based off of what you see and the web bot and everything. Personally, I for months now, I've been telling everybody that I do believe that the big Van Dyke ETF is going to be passed in February. That's what I think that's going to happen. Now, given that prediction, I guess, if you will, I believe that the over-the-counter market right now is booming. I believe that there are a lot of people right now trying to prepare for the passing of this ETF in February, and they're trying to accumulate over-the-counter without adjusting prices. And anytime that the price does start to rise up for whatever reason, I feel like some of these manipulators are pushing it back down just to keep it at a safe spot so that they're able to profit over the counter without getting the price raised too much that some of these people looking to speculate on the price between now and February are still willing to buy in. And I think that as the over-the-counter volume continues to dry up, so to speak, because apparently the over-the-counter volume right now is like 3 to 4 times that of exchange volume currently.
Okay.
And
sure.
So, but what happens is when all these people are trying to pump in, I know somebody right now trying to spend $1 billion on buying Bitcoin over the counter. If there is a seller out there, they'll buy it right now. $1 billion worth of Bitcoin right now. They will not touch exchanges.
And I know some people with big money, nowhere near that big, but I know people in the same situation.
People want in, but they don't want to go in on exchanges, and they don't want all that slippage. They don't want to jack the price up on themselves in the middle of their buy. And so that's where we're at. And so I think that I do
agree with you. You're quite correct. I've seen the same signs in my data that there's some kind of a waiting game being played, but I won't go to the extent of saying that it's for this particular ETF or whatever. But I agree with you. Emotionally, I'm picking up the got to damp it down, got to hold everything just right here at this point. There's a lot of anxiety on the part of these people that everything should be like stabilized until some near-term period of time. The near-term period of time, I think, it is, as you say, well, it's within the short-term data, so it'd be 3 months out to maybe 6 months or so. So you may be indeed right that it's this particular ETF.
And I think once that hits, this money that's in the space, so you're going to have all of these players on the back end who got in over the counter. Price is probably going to be somewhere 10, 12 grand. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm not really making a price prediction. And then at that point, we're going to start seeing all the institutions come in that are going to be driving the value and the price up. And at that point, once a lot of these institutions start coming in, I don't see the price being as manipulatable, if that's even a word.
I agree.
And from then on, it's just kind of either, we're going to have our volatility, but it's going to be a much more smooth sailing. And then nobody's going to be able to get in anymore at prices as they are today. I mean, it's just going to change the whole game for the future.
I would agree, and there's actually supporting evidence for what you're saying because of the hiring patterns at specific industries relative to technical skills. So I've noticed an uptick in the hiring at the network and the hardware level for people that will be tasked with maintaining cold storage. And specifically, a lot of the cold storage language is showing up in some of these recruit announcements. I've also noticed an uptick in generalized blockchain awareness kind of thing, and the ability to write specific front-end technology to access either blockchains for trading or for maintenance and this kind of a deal. So I would agree that with your assessment, but again, I don't know about the intent as to what's being what we're waiting for, right? I just know that indeed the emotions are saying that, or the emotional tones are saying that these people are waiting for something and doing everything they can to try and maintain this status quo at this point. I also agree that there's people that are not going to sell much below the 6,400 mark, and that was a real hard line. Yeah, and it hit them in late May when they really when we started really forming a floor there relative to what was going on. And then I got sick through June and July. I didn't pay much attention. I was sick all this year anyway, but I didn't pay much attention. Then went into surgery and so on. Started really getting back into it in late August and picked up on a lot of the data sets then. And indeed, we're at that point where I think I would say certainly less than 6 months. Okay, so within 6 months, the powers that be will have made major moves towards converting digital dollar assets to blockchain assets. And I can say this with certainty because people keep trying to hire me to do work, right. and I'm not alone.
Do you? I have to assume that you think, and I could be wrong, but you think that the Bitcoin ETFs, you think that's a good thing for the space?
No, I'm I really don't like any of the abstractions. I know that they're necessary, that there's just simply not enough at 21 million for Bitcoin to serve its function alone. So we will have to have abstractions on top. But I'm not a financial guy. That kind of stuff bores me. So I'm not really an aficionado.
Strictly from a price perspective, taking the technology out of it, do you think that having the ability for those with huge, massive amounts of money looking to speculate on value or buy and hold long term, do you think that that's good for the overall Bitcoin price moving forward the next 3 to 5 years?
Yes, but not necessarily good for
the use case.
Correct.
I get
and
it.
The use case is what's going to save humanity really from the current stinky mess we're in, right? So let's look at it this way. That approach is used to transition all of the dollar material into the Bitcoin or into the blockchain world.
Right.
But it in no way promotes blockchain as a generalized solution to the other problems. It's more or less trying to corral it, and so they can run their criminality on the outside of it. Now we know that this won't happen. That the trust aspect of the blockchain is such that criminality is crashing already. But the whole ETF approach, yeah, it's probably necessary. It's beyond my pay grade, so to speak, in terms of level of thinking. If people want to go and do that and they feel there's a need for it, then they're going to go and do it regardless. Personally, I'm a hodler, and I'm not into the abstractions at that level. But I can see where, Aunt May and your grandmother may not want to hold directly. They may just want to buy at an abstract level, and there will definitely need to be that kind of participation for various different reasons. It needs
to be easy to get it in custody, taken care of, everything just being a very smooth transition. Right. I did a video where I talked about just 5% of the global pension funds going into Bitcoin and what that could potentially do for the price. It was like, it ended up being like $1.4 million of Bitcoin or something crazy. I mean, it was stupid.
Sure. And actually, I did a calculation way back when in like 2013 that said if just 1% of the Forex trades in the United States went in there, we'd be looking at over $1 million in Bitcoin.
I think one way or another, at some point, Bitcoin will hit that mark. I don't, with such a finite supply at 21 million, with I think I read something that 30% of the total circulating volume of Bitcoin is actually locked up and lost. I mean,
hey, we can blame Max Kaiser for a lot of that.
It's like, it's going to be I feel like it's going to be more rare than diamonds and more rare than just about anything else out there at some point in the future. And I don't necessarily think it's because you played Risk, right? The board game Risk.
Sure.
So have you ever just taken all of your soldiers on the board, put them all on one country, and then just march through and taken out the rest of everybody else?
No, I was never Genghis Khan.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like you can kind of look at what's going on or the potential of what's going on, kind of like playing a board game of Risk like that. While all the money's going to be pumped into Bitcoin, it's going to help just kind of take over everything else and kind of spread itself out to everything underneath it. I think
Well, see, this is a good deal, though. Okay, people say, I've had all kinds of strange arguments put against the cryptocurrencies, even in this advanced age of 8 years on, right? But humanity has a really bad problem at the moment. The really bad problem is related to the deep woo-woo stuff like Bix Weir believes, right? Bix Weir believes the Grand Canyon is full of gold, and I do not dispute him. Bix Weir believes that the Federal Reserve was intended to create a unbacked monetary scheme and run it to the ground, extract every bit of wealth out of there, because we have so much gold that you can't use gold as money. Many people, especially like in Christian heritage and in the South, when I was growing up as a kid, they would say the streets of heaven are paved with gold. And it's like, well, if you're paving your streets with it, it isn't worth anything, right? It's worth asphalt, right? And that's really what it is. If you got so much gold, you can pave streets with it. It's worth the same value as asphalt. So
it's a really good perspective, because that's never crossed my mind before, but that's good.
and that's basically what Bix Weir is saying. And I agree, because I have read in detail the data that Buckminster Fuller used to do his assay of all planetary resources back in the 30s. And I think, of course, there was mathematics errors and he did some things wrong, but I think he's quite correct. And there should be just tons more gold than we actually find that has ever been mined or claimed to have been mined, and by many factors of magnitude. So gold is not as scarce and as precious. Now, diamonds we know are not scarce and precious. But we do know that Bitcoin will be so. We also know that countries are working now to have a smooth way in which they can use Bitcoin as their national reserves and cross-border settlement. As I have to puff up and say, I predicted 4 and 5 years ago from my data sets that Bitcoin would move into the level of sovereign settlements, big debts being settled, and everything else would be settled back on the daily use would be on other coins. But here we are with all of this wealth locked up in a dying dollar. That wealth has to be transitioned to the new system. That new system will arise whether we design it or not. If we don't design one and we let it all crash, then we're back to trading chickens and gold and so on. And that means a local economy, and maybe, 4/5 of all of humanity dies off because we can't support them. If, on the other hand, we're smart creatures, we will have a designed, functioning economy that will last longer than the 100+ years of the US dollar, that will be designed to go out maybe 1,000 years or whatever with the digital approach, the cryptocurrencies. And we will transition all of that wealth in as orderly and a safe manner as possible into the new system. Now, at this point, we've run into the same situation I saw as a kid in France, okay? When I went into Europe in the early 60s, France had a terrible, terrible situation with their money. And they actually had to go to the unthinkable extreme of reissuing the French franc. And they did it. And of course, if you reissue a new franc and you're not accepting the old ones, you got to give a chance for the people with the old ones to come on in and get new ones with the old ones. And everybody's bitching because they got to turn in 5 old francs to get 1 new franc. And yet there's the emotional connection in their mind that this 1 new franc really only has the value of 1 of the old 5 francs. And they know it's all bogus anyway, but they've got to do it. Riots ensued, people died. It was a terrible time in France for months and months and months. And we're sort of at that system now, where we've got to transition, and an orderly transition is ugly. People will die. Criminals will try and get their vast hordes of dollars into the Bitcoin, and they're actually trying to do this ahead of the rest of the people. You'll notice a lot of the activity is attempting to move big tranches of money. A lot of it's going to be criminal money that they're trying to get over, because they can read the signs on the wall, and they know they got to get it out of dollars, because in a short while, dollars won't be accepted. And criminals are very sharp, usually at that level, fiscal financial managers, because they've got to be. It's survival. And so they're going to pay much more attention, be early movers and so on. And we're right there now as that transition is starting to occur. The alternative is really terrible. And so I'm doing everything I can to, help save humanity, so to speak, by, at all possible, getting people to move into a smart awareness, a cautious, conditional approach to examining blockchain and getting themselves involved in it, because that's their future.
So I've got, hold on 1 second. The viewers can't hear this, but Our dog is just driving me nuts right now. He's the whiniest dog. He wants something. He's the sweetest dog, but he just keeps whining all the time, and I don't think he likes his new room. So what? 2 things. 1, when is the next report coming out? And then 2, What are your thoughts on this whole 10/10/2018, November 11th, 2018, this all economy magazine hoopla? Like, what's your perspective on all of that that's going on?
I think it's a year out. Okay, so the Economist magazine is cover for 2018 was a year off. All right, when they did it way back in 1988, they should have aimed it at 2019 because that's when the shit's going down. I think that was their way of saying we're transitioning out of fiat money. I mean, it's slap you in the face, obvious that by 2018 you wouldn't be dealing in paper currency. That's why I say we're a year off on it. It'll be 2019 before we start seeing everybody move into the cryptos. And then there's going to be a boom on this planet like you wouldn't believe for a few years as the education takes place. And we have to build up the infrastructure for all of this. And this is going to be global. And China is getting geared up now. They're adjusting their curricula to get people into this kind of computing science, and naturally people want to do it anyway because they've heard of it and they know it's a growth area and so on. But the Chinese government in their central planning is saying we're going to need X number of blockchain engineers. We're going to need X number and so on, and they're planning to train them. And that's basically where we're at. We're at that transition point. The Economist magazine knew that the dollar was going to die and that the fiat empire would come burning down and that we would be replacing it. And they showed it as gold, but you notice the symbol in the middle of it is the computer zero with the line through it, right? The null. And so they were telling us then that they knew it would be digital. They knew it would be electronic. And so it's like, oh, okay, that's fine. They're evil bastards. They're the Rothschilds own Economist magazine, and it's their mouthpiece, and they're trying to control the world and stuff. But that doesn't mean that I can't outsmart them and beat them at their own game and help a few 100,000 other people do exactly the same, right? So I'm not particularly. It's kind of like, I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm feeling pretty healthy and stuff, right? So I'm going to be a little bit egoistic and say that. A warrior defines himself by his enemies. And my enemies are the most powerful people on this planet. So I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say so. Everybody's been talking about your guns the whole video. Like every time Cliff goes live, he's got his guns out. Like,
yeah. That business.
Oh,
yeah.
Look at that. Holy cow.
Yeah. I'm gaining weight back, so I'm starting able to do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, because and I caught that early on when you said that you had found out that I guess whatever you were sick with, you're gonna live a lot longer than you thought. I mean, that was
see, here's the deal, guy. I actually had a cancer. Okay, I had a cancer the size of my fist, more or less, 2 inches by 2 inches by 1 inch, that got cut out in my intestine. I didn't know the cancer was there. I knew I was very deathly ill, and for a number of years, I thought I would die last year in 2017.
Holy cow.
And I was operating on that principle. I had been undiagnosed with a disease or a condition. I'd been undiagnosed with a condition for over 15 years, had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars going to many doctors trying to find the diagnosis, never was able to succeed in doing so. And that diagnosis, in the process of finding this subception where the intestine goes into itself, they had to cut this section out. They found a cancer in there. But I'm not particular. I've had cancer diagnoses before, and here's the thing: I'm a schizotypical. Okay, a schizotypical is someone who is a family member that survives a sibling with full-on schizophrenia. And so my brother was full-on schizophrenic. He was even more full-on because he got it very young. Schizophrenics usually develop in their 20s and 30s, but he did it way early. Anyway, though, so schizophrenics are basically protected from cancer. They can smoke 5 packs a day and never get lung cancer. I smoked for 17 years. I've still got nearly 6 liters of lung capacity, no sign of cancer there at all. But I had a cancer in me that was in my intestines, but it was a situational cancer in the sense that because the intestine was over the course of years getting itself irritated and into itself, it was causing the irritation that basically caused the cancer. And when they did the lymph node examination, there was no cancer in any of the other lymph nodes, in spite of the fact that the cancer had been there developing for about 15 years. But
after all of that, they couldn't just throw you in a machine and scan your body and see a fist-sized growth in your
This
intestine?
is what's so funny. I've had all kinds of examinations. You wouldn't believe it. But nobody ever did a CAT scan under circumstances and looked at or they didn't understand what they were looking at. And that's one thing the surgeon who did the work told me, that I was lucky that I was in this podunk little hospital here in Grays Harbor, because the radiologist was very skilled, ex-military guy, and he spotted it instantly, knew I had to have surgery within an hour, and got the surgeon over there and did all of this stuff. And it was happenstance so maybe none of the other people would have recognized what they were looking at anyway, because it was very rare.
But that wouldn't be considered an abnormality. I mean, a fist-sized growth in your intestines is something that
but you wouldn't have seen it, because
really?
I would have gotten into the details, but you wouldn't have actually seen the cancerous mass.
Oh.
They had actually it had thrown a shadow on an ultrasound and made them think that I had a lump on my bladder, but what they were actually looking at was the reflection off of the mass in the in the intestine. So it was just happenstance. But like I say, I'm doing better. That has changed my attitude, because for at least the last 15 years, it's been wearing me down as that process of those two elements basically trying to kill me took over. And now that they're removed, it's like, oh, okay, I can go to the trouble of systematically building myself back up. So I still have some weight to pack back on, and I got to first get rid of some fat, convert it to muscle, and then add some more weight. But my goal is to get back to maybe 40s fighting level at 172 pounds.
You want to be a fighting welterweight?
Hey, I've done Aikido for 30 years. I want to get back to it.
Oh man. I can tell you look better, you sound better. You definitely, you seem happier. I will say, I've only interviewed with you once, but you can, I just thought that was kind of you seem lighter this time around, and that's, for sure.
Okay. And so, right. Well, as a result of the cancer, even though I'm a protected subspecies, being a schizotypical, and I'm not likely to have any, fundamentally, the oncologist said that schizophrenics never die of cancer, and schizotypicals may get cancer, but he's never had any of his patients die of them. And he's been treating cancer patients for 20 plus years and has had over 30,000 of them. And he's had 5 people that were acknowledged or diagnosed schizophrenics, each of which had some form of cancer develop. And he said it was just like with me. It was a no big deal. It was just simply a lump that was removed with no other involvement, no metastasizing, no lymph nodes or any of that. But as a result of that, I got into a deeper investigation of biology and discovered a major flaw in our thinking, okay, as a species, or as an American species. And that is, the flaw is this thing called RDA, recommended daily allowance, okay? The RDA is actually a minimum value applied to necessary ingredients. Vitamins are required for life, but your body doesn't make them. And so you need vitamin D, and the government has decided that the RDA for vitamin D is 40 units. I'm just making this number up. I don't know what their RDA actually is, but they're going to say 40 units of vitamin D is what is required for you to not get rickets, and that's the RDA. Well, there's a flaw in that. It's like you're going down to the lowest bid, so to speak, on a contract, right? And you want to get quality work. You're going to take the higher bids. So I want optimal health. So in terms of happiness and so forth, I feel a lot lighter, a lot more connected, and a lot happier, because I've really upped my vitamin levels to try and find out what is optimum for my body. Now within this thinking, the RDA is also really stupid, because it assumes that every single human is a replica of the people that they used for that exam, and that came up with that little amount that they decided, and that no variation in humanality exists such that other humans would require more vitamin D, that's flawed. That's not true. My mother needed vitamin B shots. So there are people that need to have vitamin B shots once a week. So we know that and that's a minimum requirement. How much better would they feel if they actually got an optimal dose? So I'm taking vitamin C, B, complex vitamins individually, and vitamin E and so on, and reaching for optimal dose. And it's great.
That's great. I'm glad to hear it. there's a lot of stuff that I'm planning on changing here pretty soon as well. So, you know, the vitamins, and I've got a guy who's going to start coming to the house a few times a week, training my fat ass, get me into shape. You know, at 40, I'm nowhere near the physical shape I used to be in, and it's been really killing me. So
I understand. When I was 40, I hit that same kind of issue. Now, what I did then was to go to a doctor and tell him, draw out some blood and take an analysis that I can carry forward with me into the future. So I can look, when I'm 60, I can look back and say, oh, at 40, I had this level of this vitamin, I had this amount of this hormone, and so on.
Right.
And now I can match to see if I'm down. So it makes sense to benchmark yourself now, even if your fat ass isn't in really great shape, just to be able to get all of those markers.
Right.
But another thing here too is that the oncologist was very definite about this. The key element for any kind of intestinal cancers at all is exercise. He says he can look at a cancer patient and say, this guy's going to die 2 years from now, and he says, you know, it's just internal voice, and he says, because the guy doesn't exercise. And he says, I can look at somebody that, frail old grandmother that, you know, has cancer, and he says she'll be around another 10 years because she gets out twice a day and walks 6 miles.
Wow. Yeah, I just saw Sylvia T said, don't discount grandmas. This 72-year-old's got 6 kids into it. 2 enthusiasts, 4 skeptics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, look, I'm glad to see you in great health, and I would love to do this again. When is your next report coming out for everybody curious?
It's indeterminate at this stage because we're still within that. If I were to sample data now and rely on that data, it's going to be with this oppression of the manipulation.
Right.
And so I'm not planning on bringing out a report until I can get some data that isn't overwhelmed here. Correct.
Right. Yeah, I get that. And I actually appreciate that because, like, if it were, you know, you see people, their comments and skeptics and stuff, and it's like, look, you could easily make a quick buck just running out a report for everybody to go out and buy, and it's not going to tell them anything that they don't already know just looking at the internet. So
right. And my point on doing all of the reports is to provide those people that are going to be getting into this stuff with as solid an information and as far a look ahead as I can, such that we'll have success for them, right? So I'm not particularly trying to generate funds by selling a report. What I'm trying to generate is successful millionaires.
Right.
I was able to get, 6 or 8 people, I mean, there are many more than that, to become millionaires, and that was kind of a good feeling. So let's do that again, right?
Yeah. All right. One last question. Should be a quick and easy one for you, and I'll let you go about your day. Jason Works says, what does CLIF think about negatively charged oxygen ions from foot baths?
It's not the foot baths are really cool if you put in Epsom salts, because you'll get both magnesium and hydrogen. And so the negatively charged ions in the ozone or oxygenated foot bath things, they're good, but they're actually working because you're getting hydrogen in there as well. So you'd be much more effective, in my opinion, to put your feet into some hot water and pitch in a hydrogen tablet, because the hydrogen molecule is small enough that it can go through the body. And the problem with oxygen is we need it. It's good stuff. We need to breathe it. But really, we're nitrogen breathers, okay? Oxygen creates oxidative stress within the body. And so adding oxygen in any way to the body is just going to increase your oxidative stress reaction. That is to say, it's going to pollute your cells with ash from that oxygen being burnt up. And I'm using ash in a loose sense.
Wow. All righty. There you have it, folks. CLIF High, halfpasthuman.com. Check it out. CLIF, I really appreciate your time, man. I mean,
Sure.
You've spent a full hour and a half with me in the audience and answered a lot of questions, been very helpful. And I look forward to doing it again sometime in the future. And like I said, I'm glad to see your health is doing well. Hopefully, probably the next time I see you, you'll be bigger and buffer than me, which won't be very difficult for you to do. So,
well, that isn't my goal, but I'll accept it. Thanks.
Based off of the arms you just showed me, man, you've got me worried. You're well on your way.
Oh well, those are from rubber bands and kettlebells. I got a real good set of kettlebells.
I know a guy who blew the hell up just lifting kettlebells. So that, good on you.
Yeah. If you have to do one exercise, work your way up to like a 35-pound kettlebell, and you're good.
Sounds like a plan. All right, crow your coins, everybody. We'll see you again soon. Thank you, Cliff, and
Okay.
halfpasthuman.com. Have a good evening.